Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Science Sunday. We are very fortunate today to have Dr. Patrick Vora from George Mason University here to talk to us about quantum technology, a new era of computing. As you know, computers are really quite recent. We tend to forget that, given how ubiquitous they've become. They're at home with us. They basically came out of the Second World War from ballistics computations, evolved very rapidly, and were used to really powerful computers requiring enormous size and consumption of energy. And yet there are still problems that are beyond current technology's ability to solve. Quantum computers are a way that may be able to suddenly disrupt those patterns and solve problems that are currently beyond our capabilities. I present to you Dr. Vora.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. And please call me Patrick, not Dr. Vora. So yeah, I'm happy to talk to you today about what quantum is. I'm going to keep this on the shorter end. I think it might be more fun to be doing some question and answer rather than being lectured at. But I am going to have a few level-setting slides. Most of them are going to focus on what quantum is as a whole, how it relates to technology, and what is the current state of things. And then I'll have one slide telling you about locally what we at George Mason are doing about it, and then that'll be it. And then we'll open up for questions. Okay, so quantum physics. Oh no, this is the one where the animations come wrong. That's okay. All right, so let's talk about what quantum physics is. So does anybody know what Newtonian physics is, or classical physics? All right, have you dropped something ever? Then you're an expert in Newtonian and classical physics. Newtonian physics is the kind of physics you encounter each and every day. It's gravity, it's ballistics, just like in World War II. And it is something that your brain, right, to survive, has developed an intuition for. When you start to think about the universe at its smallest length scales, like the length scale of an electron or an atom or a proton, your intuition fails, and it should fail. Because you are not as big as an atom. You are a conglomeration of many, 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 many atoms all interacting and bonding together chemically. So this was offensive to many physicists at the time, at the discovery of quantum physics, because the rules are just absolutely messed up and completely deviate from what you think they should be. For instance, at its most basic level, we now know that reality is indeed probabilistic. I can measure the same thing twice and get a different result. And if I keep measuring it over and over and over again, what I'll find is very often I'll get a very nice bell curve centered around the most likely value that this object in principle could have. So what you're seeing here is actually the distribution, what we would call something called a wave function for an electron in a hydrogen atom. So because reality is probabilistic, I can't tell you where the electron is in the atom. You've probably seen those old nuclear signs, right, where you have the core and the things going around it, right? And this is this was like Bohr's model of the atom at first, but it's actually wrong. The electron exists everywhere you see non-black dots on that image there. It has a chance to be at all of those places, but it is never in any one of those places until you measure it. It's very strange. So that is the first thing we learned from quantum mechanics, is that reality at its core is not deterministic. It is actually probabilistic. And you don't know what it's going to be in until you actually look at it, which is another cool thing. Measurement changes the systems. It's very neat and kind of messed up. Who likes cats? Get ready to be disappointed. So the next thing we want to convey here is something called the concept of quantum superposition. So we know about, you guys are all, have you ever heard about zeros and ones before? Zeros and ones for computers? All right, this is how we encode information in modern day computers. We use binary, right? So There's a physical thing for that, though, and this is something I think people don't often think about. We've kind of abstracted away from it with the focus on code. When something is set to a 0 or 1, then in your cell phone, if you dig down into the processing unit on it, there are actually 16 billion identical little chunks of silicon where you change the conducting nature of it. You flip it between either it allows current through, and that's a 1, or you don't, and that's a 0. So every time you do this in code, physically on your chip, 16 billion identical electrical elements are being modulated in real time, which is remarkable. Superposition is a very strange feature of quantum physics, which allows things to go beyond being strictly binary. So if you imagine having a bit which can be 0 or 1, now it can be 0, 1, and both simultaneously. It exists in all possible combinations of 0 and 1 until you make that measurement. So it's, again, a very strange thing. It would kind of be like if I was measuring, pretend this is a quantum lamp, and I was measuring the position, I wanted to know the position of this lamp. Well, I would say, well, the lamp is really everywhere from being centered here to over here. It's just the likelihood of it being over here or here is lower than it is for being here. So it's very strange. It exists in all those states simultaneously. And this sounds wonky, because it is wonky, because you have no intuition for the atomic world. Right? But, and I don't know if you'll believe me on it, but I hope you will, but for those young people in the audience, anytime somebody says, believe me, ignore them. Because they're usually lying. Or they haven't looked it up. I will tell you, without a citation on my slide, which means you should go and check on it yourselves, that we have verified quantum mechanics to a much higher degree than gravity. So we understand. So what does that mean? That means that when we go and do experiments and try to extract these things called fundamental constants, like similar to like the speed of light, right, or the rate at which things fall, we can measure those to a much higher precision in quantum than we can in classical physics. And that means our error to which we know things in gravity is higher than to what we know things in quantum. So we would say that we understand it better then. So it's weird, but it's like super true, yo. All right? That was for the kids, the two of them. All right? The next thing that's weird is something funky called wave-particle duality. So this is a concept that particles are not particles, but waves are also not waves. It's very strange. Have you heard of a photon? Okay. So typically light we model as something called an electromagnetic wave. We model it as an oscillatory thing. You know, when you see colors, that's the wavelength of the light. So it's essentially the spacing between the peaks on that oscillating curve right there. Right? So that's what it is. But light also behaves like a particle, which is really weird. So we have to rectify this somehow. And so what is actually happening is that light is an object that has both wave and particle characters simultaneously. And this little wave, we call it a wave packet. Thing you're seeing traveling across the slide there is how it happens. The wave is kind of constrained in space. So inside of, if you look at this and you take off your glasses, like if I take off my glasses, I see a blue blob, right, going across there. And I'm like, oh, that's a particle. But then if you look at it a little bit differently, you're like, oh, there's the wave nature of it manifesting if I do an experiment with it in this way. So this is something that remarkably extends beyond light and goes into matter too. This is the crazy part to me. Even electrons are wave-like. Even protons are wave-like. They have wavelengths, just like light. And we verify, and by we, I don't mean me, much smarter scientists than me have verified that this is still true up to molecules containing 810 atoms. They can interact them with each other and observe these kind of effects. So it's really wild. Oh, I didn't talk about the dying cat for superposition states. Do you want to hear about that, or is that a little? No, we don't want to hear about it. All right, then we're not going to talk about that. What animal don't we like today? We like cats? Mary, hit me. Dogs! Get out. Dogs. Rats? All right, yes, there it is. So it's gonna be the spotted lanternfly, because nobody likes them, right? So let's take it and let's put it in a box. That's innocuous enough. Then let's go get some poison, because we're evil, and we're gonna put that in the box too, because, you know, why not? But it's in a vial, it's in a sealed vial, right? Because we're not monsters yet. So then I'm gonna rig a hammer on a spring and have a sensor on the hammer where it's detecting particles emitted by a radioactive source. In radioactivity, what's happening is an atom is decaying into another kind of atom by emitting out like protons, neutrons, electrons, what have you. So we're going to detect those emitted particles. But radioactivity is a quantum process. It's random. So we don't know when those particles are going to arrive. So at any given point in time, the lanternfly could still be kicking in the box, but it could also be dead. And we don't know until we open the box and check. So that's what we mean about, you know, you don't know until you look at it. It's existing. So Schrodinger, when he was doing this with cats, because he hates cats, was doing this and saying that the cat is simultaneously dead and alive, or the lanternfly is simultaneously dead and alive inside the box. You don't know until you look. You don't know the state until you do the measurement. It's in all the possibilities. Okay? So that's superposition and tying into wave-particle duality a little bit. All these things are deeply connected to each other, right? So these are just how we divvy them up best. The last thing is quantum entanglement, which has become a mainstay of science fiction. And not to say that I don't enjoy it, but they do get it a little bit wrong. So let's try to talk about it for a second. So we talked about probability, wave nature, and superposition states. So what if I take two quantum things and interact them? Depending on how they're interacting, their probability distributions can become linked. So it could be something as simple as, let's keep going to this lamp, and I don't know what this is called, lamp holder. So this lamp and the lamp holder. Right now, I am jealous, I want one. I want 10. So right now, their positions are linked, right? The lamp holder is supporting this one. So they have their locations as being connected right now. Now, if they're quantum objects, the nature of that interaction intertwines their probability distributions about where they are at any given point in time. And the thing is, I'm not going to touch it, don't worry. If I grabbed it and I took it to the other side of the room, they remain connected because of something called conservation laws. And so they remain connected. So I can take that lamp to the other side of the room, to the other buildings, to, I don't know, giant, whatever. And I can take it to the other end of the universe. And as long as I don't measure it, it remains connected to this. All right? But because the states are linked, if I measure this, I automatically know the state of the lamp holder, which is really cool. So that's quantum entanglement. It allows you to connect the probability distributions, i.e. the wave functions of two quantum objects. So these things are all super non-intuitive, but better verified than gravity. So they're very much real. So where are we as a species with this? We know these things exist. We know they're happening. And now, you know, as monkeys do, we're trying to make stuff out of it. So we discovered this stuff. That's been called by some the first quantum revolution, where we discovered quantum mechanics, we discovered how much it describes reality, and then we were like, let's make stuff. And your phones are a direct result of this. Understanding the properties of silicon, understanding how to control silicon is a quantum mechanical problem. And this is something called band structure solid state theory. And so we learned it, and we were able to harness it. And now you have a chip in your phone to run, I don't know what, TikTok, that has 16 billion transistors, all identical, all at the nanometer length scale, which is crazy. And they're all identical, and they rarely fail. It's an amazing marvel of technology. Somebody should tell the dishwasher manufacturers about it, because that would be really nice. And so, but the thing is, there we used quantum to understand, not to build. Now we are trying to make devices and computers that actually use the quantum principles to do functionality, not to just like exist and understand the stuff you're making something out of. So this is a new era. It's called the second quantum technological revolution. And let me just very briefly tell you of just 2 examples where it is being applied and doing so quite successfully. So if you open up Ars Technica or your technical magazine of choice, you'll probably see something about quantum computing these days. And you'll definitely see it if you're monitoring stocks. Quantum stocks are kind of crazy and insanely speculative because everything is still hype right now. But the hope with all this is that you will be able to make a computer that will be much more powerful than a classical computer. What is important to understand is it won't be more powerful at everything. There are specific problems that can be tackled mathematically better by a quantum computer than a classical computer. But there are things like opening Microsoft Word that a classical computer would do much better. So a quantum computer is not a God machine. Right, it's not going to solve everything better and make stuff just all trivial. It will do some specific tasks of certain problems better than a classical computer. And when I say better, I mean a heck of a lot better. The computational time goes from being like, starting to approach the age of the universe to being a few seconds. And I only use hyperbole lightly there. It really is that dramatic of a speed up. So the way this works is that you have objects that are quantum mechanical in your computer. They're called your quantum bits. You put them near each other, and each quantum bit can kind of store, you can think about it as storing more information than a classical 0 or 1 bit, because I can put it in superposition states, right? I can make it be 0 and 1 simultaneously. So that's already denser information. Then you can imagine interacting these quantum bits with each other and entangling them. So you create entanglement between them. And now you have a chip of bits that are existing in these probabilistic states, and they're all connected to each other. And this is a very different way of doing computing than flipping switches like we're doing right now in your phones. And so I'm not going to try to delve into the mathematical complexities of that because I don't understand them. But I will tell you that the way you load information onto a quantum chip and then process it is just in a fundamentally different way. So the algorithms all change, but this is what makes it possible to solve very difficult problems. So some of the areas you should expect to see quantum computing have an impact in first. So if you're a national security expert, the thing you should be most worried about is cryptography. Factoring prime numbers is really the basis of a lot of our security and has been for the past, and our adversaries have stolen decades worth of data from government servers. So right now that can't necessarily be decrypted easily, but a quantum computer could do it lickety-split. So this is a major issue. All right, and you can imagine that extending to even your Amazon purchases, right? They're all protected by RSA encryption. I'm sure there's a better standard right now that's being used, but quantum computers can go after that sort of stuff. So that's one area. Another area is in scheduling. Amazon, have you heard of the traveling salesman problem? Where the salesman's got to go to all 50 states as efficiently as possible and get back home. That is something called mathematically an NP-hard problem, and it's something quantum computers are uniquely positioned to do. So you can imagine it making, Amazon trucks get to you better. You could also imagine being in a disaster scenario where you need to distribute aid more effectively and needing to use a quantum computer to improve resource allocation and scheduling. That would be a very nice application of it. There's fundamental physics applications, there's applications in finance, there's applications in fluid dynamics, aerospace. Many, many, many different areas have problems that can be classified as NP-hard. And by the way, I'm not representing myself as a quantum computing expert. My work is shooting lasers at rocks and seeing what colors they glow. Super fun. But I am not the true expert with quantum computing algorithms. So I'll just put that out there, especially since I guess we're on YouTube right now. All right. And before I get, canceled for something, I don't know. Anyway, other things you can use it for beyond computing is sensing. So quantum objects are very susceptible to the external environment. So you can actually create new kinds of sensors that can take advantage of that susceptibility and turn it from, a bad thing into a good thing. And you can use it to probe the universe in ways that we never have before. One example is, have you heard of LIGO? Gravitational waves. That's a quantum sensor. The light, they couldn't get, so for those who don't know, gravitational waves, You know, we exist in reality. That's pretty great. It's kind of like this space here, right? But imagine me being squished and stretched out, and squished and stretched out. Under extreme gravitational forces, the fabric of the universe itself is compressed and stretched over and over again. Best example of this is around black holes. So quantum sensors, i.e. LIGO, actually enabled us to measure vibrations in the fabric of reality from black holes that are many, many, many light years away. And we were only able to do that by preparing the light in a funny special state. I'm yammering on too much. I find this very interesting. You could also imagine a quantum sensor that could enable you to detect disease earlier in humans or in plants. You could imagine a quantum sensor that would allow you to, improve the efficiency of NMR, which is an MRI measurement, magnetic resonance imaging measurement. MRIs are already a quantum technology. They use superconductors in order to do their measurements. So there's lots of cool stuff coming in these areas. This was to kind of illustrate where we are as a nation compared to our adversaries and our quantum spending, because typically technological advancement is linked to monetary expenditure by a nation state. And we're not doing great, I'll tell you that for free. We're about half of the expenditure of China. It's really small, and I apologize for that. I'm happy to make these slides available to you guys. That's no problem. But if you zoom in, you'll see the US is clocked around 7 billion and change. China, and this is only public expenditure. There's not really a good way to get private expenditure. They keep those numbers confidential. So governmental public expenditure in quantum science and technology research is at 7 billion in the US, 15 billion in China. So factor of 2. Every dollar equates to new technological discoveries, and importantly, from my point of view, new people being trained in this area. And this is an area we are lacking severely in. And that's about as politically charged as I'm willing to get today. So what are we doing at Mason? So I'm a physicist by day, and I'm also an administrator by day, which is by far my less favorite job. So to either its benefit or detriment, I'm the director of Mason's Quantum Science and Engineering Center. We founded this organization back in 2018, and our center is a center that tries to look at, we're leveraging what we're good at. Right? So at Mason, we have expertise in a variety of different areas related to quantum. One of them is materials. We talked about silicon earlier. You got to make stuff out of stuff, right? So we like to explore new materials that may exhibit quantum mechanical properties at room temperatures. Typically, quantum computers actually operate at a temperature way colder than space. It is an insanely cold temperature. It's almost absolute zero. So that's bad, right? Because that means you're not going to have it in your phone. Right, and that's, I guess, our technological goals as a society. So the cooling's a major challenge, both energetically and practically. So, if we can find quantum materials that are either better sensors or better computational elements at room temperature, that's a big win. We also have people working in quantum computing and algorithm from a software point of view. How do we take all this great code, all this math about solving problems, and turn it into code that actually runs on a quantum processor? Yes, Mary? Just hi?
That's 2 questions.
That's 2 questions. She's done. She's done. Cut her off. So we have people doing that, and we have people working on quantum sensors as well, trying to detect magnetic fields really, really well. And all of these things are linked together. We work with each other. But really at the foundation of everything we do is education and workforce development. We talk about workforce development is now the term being bandied about at the funding level, so we use it. But I think about it more as teaching people this stuff and lifting them up. That's my take on that word. And so just a few things about our center. We're interdisciplinary. We work with anybody from any department. We don't care. As long as you're interested in pursuing quantum problems, you're welcome in our tent. We're able to provide some funding to them. We have an emergency fund for students, which has come in really handy lately, as you can imagine, with the funding cuts. So we've been able to step in and help out and prevent people from having to stop their PhDs and their master's programs, which has been great. We are dedicated to building a workforce with access for all. Our thing that I'm really, really proud of is we have a high school program and a teaching program. In our high school program, we specifically target students who don't know quantum. We don't want the kids who are doing great. We don't want 100% in everything. We want kids who don't know about it because we want to bring more people into this tent. We want to expand access. So we bring in kids who don't know anything about it. We pay them so that they don't have to choose between taking a summer internship experience and, you know, potentially making money for their families, which is, you know, becoming more of a thing these days. So that way we make sure that we try to eliminate as many barriers as possible. And then we bring them in at the Mason for like 3 weeks and we take them around the area and we teach them quantum, and then off they go and we stay in touch and are a resource for them. So I'm really proud of that program. We also teach teachers. So we bring teachers in, bring them in the labs, we pay them because their time is worth something, believe it or not. And we teach them a little bit about quantum, and then we work with them to build quantum courses that work for their students. So we actually had a kindergarten teacher. Does anybody who have young kids? Oh, that guy? Amazing. I had no idea. So if you've got young kids and you're familiar, yeah, hi, you're back. You're familiar with them being in more than one emotional state simultaneously, right? So that's quantum superposition at a child level. And what if Johnny and Bobby are fighting, right? Their emotional states are linked to each other. It doesn't matter how far across the playground they go, right? They're emotionally entangled at that point. So our goal is not to teach a 6-year-old quantum physics. Our goal is to bring those concepts into the existing educational system without disrupting what the teachers already have to teach. We don't want to make their lives worse. We just want to help them reach their goals while sprinkling in a little bit of good knowledge here and there. And I cannot take credit for creating any of these things. I'm merely the paper pusher and the marketer, right, for a lot of this stuff. The credit really goes to the amazing members of our center who've come up with these really amazing strategies that are yielding real benefits for individuals. That's the obligatory. We work with companies. We work with companies. And that's kind of it. I went on more than I thought. I should plug this. We are having a Mason Science series now, pretty much monthly, at the Fairfax Country Club. So you can come there if you're interested in these sorts of talks. This talk I gave is the same talk I gave there. Whoops. And you can go there and go to the country club and hang out and I guess see people golf really poorly. I don't know. I wouldn't know though. So that's something that you should feel free to check out, and just thank you for your time and your attention. I appreciate it. And the rest, I don't know how much time I have. Amelia's going to play me off, I think, at some point, or hit me with a paddle. She's got 2. But yeah, let's just do question and answers and hang out. Yes?
So now with all the cuts in... Wait. Sorry, we're on Zoom. With all the cuts at the federal level for research, yeah. I'm wondering where you continue to get your funding. Maybe it was that block of companies you just flashed up on your last slide. But how badly have the federal cuts hit you, and what are your other alternatives?
So the federal cut has decimated our plans for education. We had hired 3 postdocs a member of my center, I should say. So I say we in a general manner here. But we had just hired 3 people who had completed their PhDs and were really interested in physics education. And we had to fire them all within a day. And they had turned down jobs to come with us. So the work that they were going to do was going to really take what we had been doing in education and try to expand it out beyond just our local Northern Virginia community. And I really, that really disappointed me, because you really need to, these things would change lives and trajectories potentially for many people. And if you want to get it from like a nation state perspective, those are individuals who are not trained in these technologies, and therefore the US is that much less competitive. So in an area that's key for economic existence and national security existence. So I think it's a big impact.
Know what the actual number?
We've lost Mason, I think, has lost north of 40 to 50 million at this point in federal grants. Mars Center lost about 2 million in federal grant funding. So it's, yeah, it's pretty bad. And it's, to me, I find it very upsetting because these are numbers when they're reported on the news, right? But these are individuals, right? These are human lives, right? These are young men and women who are excited about physics or engineering or chemistry or biology, and their chances are just cut out from under them. That's problematic to me. So hopefully that will not, continue. Hopefully that was like a one-time shock and awe campaign. But we don't know, so we'll see. Yeah. But in answer to your question about where we're going for funding, I mean, it's only been 9 months, which is the crazy thing of all this, right? So that's not that much time for the community to adjust and reply, because the typical grant cycle is at the very least 9 months. So you put in a grant, you won't hear for 9 months. But I think I personally have been looking to work more with companies in this space to try to secure other lines of funding. And I would be shocked if my colleagues across the country are not. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess I have a question about, I guess to be a bit more optimistic and future focused.
Please do.
I just have a question about how maybe the coding might work, where it's like, obviously you said it's intuitive enough to explain like binary, but you said that you're a physics professor and you still wouldn't fully understand how the quantum entanglement coding would work.
That's just because I'm a bit of an idiot. So
yeah, but I mean, also I guess I wanted to ask if they're gonna be. Do you think it'll be easy to explain in the future once people understand it more, or do you think it's going to be more like how AI is, where people, like there's something there, but people don't fully understand what's going on?
I think it's not like AI in the sense that a quantum computer is still, you can still think of it as an object where you put in code and get an answer out. It's not something where it's like forming a neural network and generating new stuff and you don't know how. This is a great question. Because there's a lot of things with AI and machine learning where it's like, oh, an answer. How'd you get that? And the computer's like, I don't know, I'm not alive. And you're like, all right, good talk. And there's no way to back out the pathway from the input to the output. Quantum computers are not going to be like it in that way. We actually teach a course where we teach, it's a physics classified course, but there's only one prerequisite, which is to understand matrices. And so we have mathematical majors take it, computer scientists take it, engineers, mechanical engineers take it, and it lets you do quantum programming in that course. And you can actually, I should mention, these computers exist at a very limited level right now. They have maybe like 5 to 10 qubits that are accessible to the public, but you can upload code and run it on a quantum computer and get a result via their cloud servers. So I think it will be understandable. Maybe the algorithm won't, you have to know a lot of mathematics to really understand how the algorithm is working and how the optimization is happening. But yeah, I don't think it's the same sort of thing as like, you give your machine God like 25% of your region's energy and it spits out like this machine learning derived thing where you have no idea how it got from A to B. It's not quite the same thing. That's a fantastic question.
Just a broad question, and that is, so much of what's around us in technology is another world. In other words, it's hard to even conceive of it.
Yeah.
And what I'm really asking is, how do you build a path to create the curiosity and the basic understanding of, what shall I say, the curiosity to know how things work, and to light the fire, so to speak, for people to dig into what's inside their cell phone or inside quantum computing or AI or any of this, because we're so sort of trapped in our bubble of experience, and as you pointed out, it's otherworldly, and you have to build a bridge across it.
I mean, that's what we're trying to do with that teacher training program, because it's either got to come at home or it's got to come from the teachers or by some summer experience or something. So we have grants. We're one of the few universities with grants targeting K-12 now. So where we're trying to bring some of these strange ideas in. Oh no, she's going to get me with question number 3. It's going to be a doozy. I don't know that I have a good answer to your question, because it really is a challenge in education at large now. How do you create that critical thinking mindset and that love of learning in a educational system where you're prioritizing standardized testing and have the curriculum so overpacked that there's not much room for anything else? I don't have a good answer for that. I think looking into various educational schools which study that would be a great thing to do. We partner with our education department to do these quantum education activities, so we're not coming in and saying we're physicists and engineers, we know better. We're getting with the people who really know what's going on. I mean, you've hit on like a major thing. I think it has to come from a lot of the parenting, and it has to come to what degree it can from the teachers. But my wife was a 3rd grade teacher. It's a big ask. They do so much work, unpaid, out of hours. There are many instances where my wife was spending a decent amount of her paycheck buying food because the kids didn't have food during the day. And if you're a kid, you cannot learn when you are hungry. What a ridiculous notion. So that's a huge question. I would love to talk to you more about it later. Yeah.
How does the technology work?
That is just an amazing question and the most fundamental. The computer, so complicatedly is the short answer, and the long answer is that it works by using, do you know what atoms are? Okay, that's okay. Take a piece of paper, rip it in 2, and then keep doing that, like forever. Will the paper always be, do you think you'll always be able to rip it in 2 again? Or is it like Legos, where you'll get to like some block that can't be torn apart? What do you think? Take a guess, it's okay. You can keep ripping it apart? That's a really good guess. And what we know is that you do actually reach a limit. It's more like Legos. It's more like starting with like a Lego castle and starting to take it apart, like breaking it down wall by wall. So eventually you get to those actual basic building blocks. And these technologies that we're talking about, they work by using those basic building blocks. So it's not like most computers are built out of thousands of Legos working together, even for like the most basic element of it. But these computers that we're talking about are using the individual Lego blocks, which are these things called atoms. And they're interacting them with each other because their interactions are really weird. Do you remember when you went down that slide and your hair stood up? That's electricity. So one of the things it does is it uses electrical interactions between them to make them work. It's not the perfect answer, but it's like the beginning of an answer. How about we have some more talking over ice cream? Yeah?
What's the difference between an NP complete problem and an NP hard problem?
Yeah, I can't help you there.
How do you convert one to the other?
Lasers, rocks. That's my job. I wish I could answer your question. I do make the rocks very cold, so that's kind of fun, but...
The way to do it is to be able to guess correctly every time you make a guess. Be able to do that correctly.
It might be true. I just can't answer it myself.
So for way to prove, you have an incomplete problem.
That sounds, all I can say is it sounds right to me, and I believe you. You seem like you know what you're talking about. So you got me.
Question for you about
Sure.
the material side of it. So we
Yeah.
don't use silicone for most of our chips now
Yeah.
that are doped. Like, what materials are we currently using for quantum computing and processing? And like, what
Great
materials are we
question.
hoping to, I guess, make? And then how are we going to make those ubiquitous, I guess, like in a supply chain across a myriad of devices and things?
You are just nailing all the problems. So right now, there's no one system that wins. We are not at the level. Part of the problem with quantum computers and quantum bits in general is that noise can act as a measurement, i.e. thermal fluctuations in your chip, and that can collapse your quantum states. All right, it ceases to be in a superposition state and it gets forced into one. So this can destroy the effectiveness of your chips. So what we need to make these chips work is something called quantum error correction to be able to kind of mitigate these effects. And we need to be able to entangle more qubits. This is an engineering problem now. It's no longer a scientific problem. So companies like IBM, IonQ, Quantinuum, many others, Google, are starting, Microsoft too, by a very different path. They're all starting to make progress on these sorts of things, and they're hitting their benchmarks, which makes me think this is actually going to be real. If they were missing their benchmarks every quarter, but they're hitting every single technical benchmark, and sometimes they're hitting it sooner. But your question was to materials. So many of the most advanced quantum computers right now use a superconducting circuit. So they make something called a Josephson junction, where they take a piece of superconductor and another piece of superconductor, and then they put an insulator in between it. So it does something called quantum tunneling. And basically this effect is kind of like if you walked towards a wall, and even if the wall was infinitely tall, you could just walk through it because you're quantum mechanical. So yeah, have fun with that. But these Josephson junctions is what they're called. They're very good qubits. And they can be manufactured by standard semiconductor manufacturing processes. So it's compatible with our existing infrastructure. So those, I don't think we have major supply chain issues around those right now, but that is an area I'm not super educated in, so I won't take a big stand on that point. But there are other ones too that utilize, atoms. So IonQ uses ions trapped in electric fields. I cannot for the life of me honestly remember which kind they use right now, so I apologize for that. What kind of atoms they use and then ionize in their things, because it matters. Like, I want to say there's a company using barium right now. So there's a few companies that use ions and atoms to do this, and so instead of sending electrical signals, they're using lasers to interact with the atoms and manipulate them and put them in different states. There are other companies that are approaching this in a completely photonic manner. So instead of having anything cooled down, or the objects that are quantum is the light itself. So it's essentially a chip you build with waveguides and interferometers and things like that, where you're sending the light through there. So yeah, there's a lot of different approaches right now. Not any one, oh, and Microsoft does something totally different. They try to use a particle called a Majorana fermion, and those you get at the interface of semiconductors and superconductors under certain conditions. And it highlights why silicon is so important and why it'll be really hard for us to move away from it ever. Because we can grow a wafer of silicon like this big that's a single crystal with very few defects in it. And that's really hard. That is like more than 50 years of materials engineering at work there. It's hard to replicate that and then get the costs down in another material. So Microsoft does this by growing, I think, aluminum. It's either one way or the other. I think they grow an indium arsenide nanowire and then they coat it in aluminum. And they've gotten very good at doing this to the point where they've gotten the defects in the crystals down to the point where they can actually see the quantum particle they want to see. And now they can start using it for computing, or that's what they claim. Yeah. Yeah, no problem. Oh, I think do you have to, oh, he has the mic. I forgot about the talking stick.
Am I first? I want to go back to the beginning of your discussion here today.
Yeah.
To the Schrodinger's cat in that box.
Or lanternfly for us,
and,
yes.
Are we ever going to know whether that cat is alive or dead before we take it out of the box?
No. That's fundamental. That's linked to the probabilistic nature of everything. Until you do the measurement, you don't know what it is in. And the measurement actually projects the cat into one of the two states, dead or alive, or the lanternfly. Really, my daughter's shoe is what projects the lanternfly into a state of death or life, because she has been radicalized against them pretty hard. Yeah.
Do we have another question?
Comments or complaints are fine as well.
My question, my impression from your slide is that you're really a center for coordination and that if someone is interested in working in this area, let's say computer engineering,
Yeah.
that they need to go through the Department of Computer, ECE, Department of
Yeah.
Electrical Computer Engineering. Okay, just wanted to verify that.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well,
Say
for
that
example,
again. Yeah.
Okay, a very personal example.
Sure.
My grandson is in his senior year at Carnegie Mellon doing
awesome.
electrical computer engineering. That's
Yeah.
going to be his degree. He wants to go on to graduate school. So he should be thinking in terms of what? Department of Computer Engineering or ECE? Or should he be thinking in terms of your center or what?
That entirely depends what he wants to do. I mean, if he wants to follow a traditional engineering track, then he should pick a traditional engineering department, you know? But if he wants to go into this kind of an area, first of all, I would be happy to speak with him and offer whatever assistance I can. But if he does want to go in that kind of an area and make a career of it, there are, you know, our center is self-funded by the university, and now we're in a model where we're like, you know, our money comes from what we bring in. There are centers across the country that have landed gigantic federal grants to fund their activities, and when that happens, usually it's an ecosystem of companies nucleates around that as well. And that money also usually comes with the university investing more in the area. So I would advise your son to be trying to find places such as that, where they have that kind of substantial investment. That will mean a more secure graduate degree process and potentially more opportunities, you know, during the degree and after the degree. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Our friend in the back has been raising his hand over and over. Poor guy. He's just getting his reps in. Yeah.
Hi. Getting back to entanglement. So you have two particles that are entangled. You pull one and say, oh, I get a reading, and that's the same reading that you're going to have at the other particle.
Yeah.
So you stop measuring that. Is there a way to change the state of the other particle, and then when you pull the first particle to see that change?
So this is one of the things in science fiction I love, and it's also not true. Once you do that measurement, entanglement's done. It's over. You've broken the link. So you can't re-entangle them unless you bring, at least as of what we know right now, right? The universe is large and possibilities are many. So as far as what I know right now, and I think that what physics is able to say, you can't make them entangled again. Unless you go back take that one from like the end of the universe, bring it back and interact it with this one here. But that's a really good question. Yeah. Yes?
Just briefly, I know this
hi,
is being
sorry.
recorded. How do I point my friend at wherever it's going to live and say you should watch this video?
I have no idea. That's a great question.
You should be able to find it on the church YouTube page. We have a playlist for Science Sundays.
Let me bring.
Hi, you got me piqued when you talked about your laser work and rocks.
Oh.
I have a cousin who won the Nobel Prize in 2005 in laser business, and his work is now in LIGO, et cetera. So what are you doing to rocks? Are you torturing them?
Yes,
or?
making them suffer in a variety of ways.
Well, I love rocks, but I don't know much about lasers, so I'm curious what you do.
This is, yeah. So what my specific research is interested in is looking at materials that exhibit quantum mechanical behaviors. And lately, so if it was around the 2005 Nobel Prize, you've probably heard of this material, graphene. And if you haven't, have you ever taken a Scantron? If you have, then you've made graphene. Because graphene is just the basic component of graphite. Graphite, as a crystal, is a bunch of sheets. It looks like printer paper, right? And so if you push printer paper, it shears off very nicely, right? And so graphene is just one of those sheets, and it's one atom thick. And it turns out, it being one atom thick, means the electrons in it behave really weird. And that weirdness is really cool. Like, for instance, they move only when an electron is in graphene. It moves as if it has no mass. But it actually does. If you take it out, it's a normal electron. But you put it in there, when it's interacting with everything in there, it propagates through the crystal as if it's massless. But it's not really. So it turns out that there are 2,000 other materials that have the same layered structure, where you can isolate one layer. And when you isolate one layer, weird stuff happens. So in my group, we do a lot of isolating of the one layers from different kinds. So some are superconductors, semiconductors, magnets, other weird things, and we interface them together. And then we study to see what kind of interactions are happening between the layers, and if those interactions are like a new phase of quantum matter. One way we like to do many physics techniques for figuring things out involve taking a rock and throwing it at something and seeing how the rock bounces off. It's called scattering. And so sometimes people do it with neutrons, sometimes with protons, sometimes with electrons. We use light. So I send visible light in, and I collect the light that's scattered back, and I analyze how the color has changed. And it's changing very, very little, fractions of a wavelength. But that equates to an energy change, and that can tell me about what's actually happening in my material. So that's my usual technique. And then I do things like I vary the temperature of the crystal. Most of my initial work, I take the crystal, I put it in, I cool it down to about 5 Kelvin, which is like pretty warm, right? The temperature of space is 2.73 Kelvin, the cosmic microwave background. And then I measure it there, and usually if the material, I like materials that exhibit something called a phase transition, whether it be structural, electronic, or magnetic, and I like seeing how they're modified by interactions. So I then go through and look at the temperature-dependent characteristics of this. And something we're now just starting to do, because Mason finally has succeeded in building a nanofabrication facility, is we're able to put electrical contacts down on the materials. So now I can simultaneously measure what's going on when I hit it with a laser, and I can measure that out with electricity, or I can do vice versa. I can do electrical things to the material and see what happens to the light. And where we're going in the future, we actually just got a 7 Tesla magnet 3 years ago, and it's been a very expensive paperweight. But we are going to now actually turn it on this year and start doing these measurements as a function of magnetic field, which allows you to essentially, something I didn't get into is that a lot of these quantum states, do you know what spin is? Okay, imagine every electron has a little bar magnet in it. North is one way, south is the other, right? There tend to be, when you have things in quantum states, usually they're spin degenerate, but when you put on a magnetic field, the north one here, its energy will change differently than the south one. So that allows us to start splitting things up and analyzing things based on this property called spin. So that's where we're going. And our work does impact quantum computing a little bit. We look at how to produce single photons and entangled photons, but a lot of what we're also doing is trying to find more energy efficient ways to do regular computing to get the cost of those data centers down. Because goodness gracious, they are voracious.
Do you guys have a particular wavelength of light that you're using, or are you using variable spectral for
So-
going across the materials? And then do you run into any ablation issues, or like are you looking at any, I guess, non-decay or radiative effects that are happening in between the layers, or that kind of stuff?
Yeah, these are always a major concern for us, right? Because if you're destroying your sample, then you're not measuring, you're measuring something that's dynamic, not static. We use green lasers because I'm comfortable working with optical wavelengths. That's most of my training. Other people use very crazy wavelengths to me, but which are very effective because the energy of your probe kind of dictates what sort of physics you get to interact with. So X-ray people are measuring excitations out of like core orbitals of atoms that are bounded together, whereas I'm mostly studying things that are like at the valence of the atom that's comprising the material. So most of my stuff is visible. We do go a little bit in the infrared. A silicon camera can typically stop seeing things at 1100 nanometers. The silicon cameras in your phones have filters to suppress all that IR, so they only see from 400 to 750 or so. But yeah, I typically excite everything at around 532, which is green, 633, which is red. And that's where we are doing right now, for the most part. But you can either detect the scattered laser light, which is going to be really close in energy to what you send it in at, because these things we're probing are very low energy excitations, or you can detect luminescence from it if it's a semiconductor material. And so that, when I hit it with green, that could happen anywhere from like 532 all the way out to 1100. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, everyone.
Thank you for your time, for your attention. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for the opportunity.
We certainly all appreciate Dr. Vora's, Patrick's contribution today. If there are any questions, I'm sure he would be glad to talk with anyone after this presentation or by email. The material will appear on the church's YouTube site in the fullness of time. Thank you all very much for coming. Goodbye.